My name is Ed Finkler. Like I said, thanks Josh for that great introduction and for getting me up here. We go back a little ways, so it was nice, and I'll try not to tell any terrible stories about him and his young age and the music we used to write. So anyway, yeah, my name is Ed Finkler. This is a talk, Stronger Than Fear, Mental Health in the Developer Community. So who am I? Well, you heard a little bit about that, but at the basic level, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a developer type. I've been a developer for a long time, an occasional musician, kind of a big ultra nerd, like nerdy stuff. I have a very large collection of vintage video games in my basement, to the chagrin of my family. But I also have a mental illness, or actually I have a couple. I have two that I've been diagnosed with. They call that comorbidity, which sounds like you're going to be murdered twice, but it just means that you have two things. Now I'm just a lay person here. I'm not a doctor or psychologist or mental health professional of any kind. I'm certified in something called mental health first aid, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm here to talk about what it's like to have a mental illness from my perspective as a kind of regular person, as a developer, as somebody who's worked as a tech professional for the last 20 years, and also talk about how mental health affects our community and our industry of people who work in this, and the community of people who work in tech and bring things together. So, like I said, I work at a company called Graph Story. I'm the CTO there. This is weird because for 20 years I have been a developer, and now suddenly I've been thrust into the executive team, which it's a small startup, which pretty much means I do the same stuff, but just if I make the wrong decision, we'll just crash and burn and everyone will lose their job, so that's cool. Anyway, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. I have an informal survey though for you, and this is going to be one of those things where you gotta get your wings shaken up here, and you're going to want to raise your hands, because also you have to raise them up because I can't see so well. There's so many cool lights here that light me up beautifully that I can't see you as well as I'd like to. But I want to have a question for you. How many of you need contacts or glasses to see effectively? I would like you to raise your hand if you do. There are a couple of you who do not. I'm very impressed with you. Your genetics are very good. Thank you. How many of you are afraid to tell people that you wear glasses or contacts? Are any of you afraid to tell people that you have this ocular device that you need to use to cope in society? That's ultimately why we have those things. Okay, so nobody's answered yes. Okay, gotcha. That's kind of expected. Have you ever had somebody tell you, could you try harder? Try seeing harder? Has anyone ever said that to you? Has anyone ever suggested that you squint instead of, I think somebody's shaking their head. I'm sorry for that. We all should apologize for that, because that's a terrible thing to have to tell anybody. So in general, we're pretty comfortable with the idea that most of us need some kind of support or help thing or some sort of medical device that allows us to get through, to cope in society as normal, because as humans age, their eyes tend to get crappy. Now, okay, that's fine and dandy. So another issue, another condition, diabetes, and my brother and my dad both developed type 2 diabetes, so I'm probably not in great shape in that regard. But I'm curious about this. How many of you would feel comfortable in the workplace, maybe not excited about it, but okay in the workplace if diabetes came up and you discussed that? I would like you to raise your hand if you would be comfortable with discussing it. Okay, so most people will be comfortable about it. Again, maybe not the most exciting thing. Maybe you wouldn't be like, hey, I had a great weekend, diabetes. You wouldn't do that necessarily, but you'd be comfortable with it. And it's a serious condition. It's a serious condition. Lots of people deal with it. If untreated, it can be fatal. It can be bad stuff. Now, another condition that a lot of us has touched a lot of our lives is cancer. And I lost my brother 2 years ago to cancer, one of my brothers. And that is a difficult thing for a lot of us. I think most of us it's touched our lives in one way or another. We know somebody or we've dealt with it ourselves. Now I want to ask that same question about cancer. How many of you would feel okay, again, not excited, would feel okay discussing, if cancer came up in the workplace, having that discussion? Somebody mentions that, oh, you know, my brother, turns out he has cancer. Raise your hand if you would feel okay with that. If that discussion would be like, I'm okay with it. Not everybody necessarily. It can be tough, and it can be tough because of the emotions that are attached with that. A lot of us have lost people because of that. How many of you would feel comfortable talking to your boss about a mental health issue? Raise your hand. Interesting. How many of you would be okay talking with a colleague about a mental health issue? So 1.5 maybe. I got 0 on boss. Those are the lowest numbers I've ever seen. I've given this talk 50 times. How about a friend or a family member, somebody you're close with? Most people are. Hands don't exactly shoot up quickly when we talk about this stuff. That's interesting. Think about that. Think about, while we're talking about this stuff, compare that with cancer and how much we talk about that in our popular culture and how much we talk about mental health. And I want you to think about that while we're discussing this stuff. Now, I'll talk a little bit about myself. That's one of my favorite subjects, is the diagnoses that I have. I have 2 things that I've been diagnosed with. One is generalized anxiety disorder. And the way that I tend to tell people my experience with it is that I have fight or flight reactions when it's not appropriate. It is appropriate to have a fight or flight reaction when my life is in danger. Like if there is a lion that's going to attack me, and I need to either run away or roundhouse kick this lion, that is an appropriate time to have a fight or flight reaction. My brain says you need to be in this mode because you might need to beat up something or you might need to run as fast as hell to get away from this thing to survive. That is an appropriate time. Your brain tells your whole body to kick in. Your physiology changes. You know, different hormones and chemicals start pumping through your system. Lots of stuff happens. Your physiology dramatically shifts from a normal state to a high stress state. And it changes because it is a survival mechanism. It is not appropriate to have a fight or flight reaction when you're going to meet friends at a bar that you've never been to, and you're standing outside, and you're so uncomfortable with the idea of going into this place, and you're not sure exactly where they're sitting, and you don't really know what it's like in there and what's the layout like, and you just get freaked out, and you decide that maybe I should just go back to my car and sit in my car for a few minutes and then just drive home instead. That has happened to me many times. That has happened to me many times. It's not appropriate to have it where you're afraid to take the bus or other kinds of public transportation because you don't understand the payment system, and you're so afraid of being embarrassed, of standing up and people being mad at you because you're slowing things down and stuff like that. I just don't ever take those. I don't take the bus. I don't take trains. It helps. I don't live in Chicago, so there's less of that, but there are at least buses where I live. And that is not an appropriate time to have those kind of reactions. But I do. I do have those kinds of reactions in those situations, particularly situations where I feel like I don't understand the rules or like I'm not competent enough to handle this. I get very, very deeply uncomfortable. My brain says something's wrong and you have to protect yourself. And it tells me that very loudly. I also have ADHD. And attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And that's something that gets thrown around a lot. A lot of people kind of talk about that stuff, and there's some things that are kind of typical that you're used to that go along with ADHD. And my experiences with it, a lot of them are similar. That as an adult, I have trouble focusing on single tasks. I often jump from one thing to another a lot. I also tend to avoid. Avoidance is a whole big thing, a big part of my life that I've struggled with. Tons. Avoidance of unappealing tasks. And it's not stuff like, well, you know, I don't really feel like doing this right now, but I'll get around to it. It's been more like, yeah, I will just never do that, and my water will get shut off because I just didn't get around to paying the bills because I kept forgetting, and when I did do it, I was like, I really don't want to. I feel like strangely like almost anxious about it and uncomfortable. It's like, I don't want to deal with it right now. I've had that happen. I have the money. I just didn't pay the bill, right? But there's a couple other things that often go hand in hand with ADHD and the kind of stuff that I deal with. And one of those things is that oftentimes, I have these two different things, but they sort of go together. I have what I usually say is a low frustration threshold. And this is fairly common with people with ADHD, that they often get frustrated quickly, especially if the way they expect things to go changes rather suddenly. Most people aren't super comfortable with that, but they can adapt okay. I have a very strong emotional reaction to that. Oftentimes, and I think it ties in with an idea that I feel uncomfortable and I tend to get angry in those situations. I get very frustrated. Or I get very frustrated when it feels like I'm just not capable of doing something, and I get frustrated much more quickly than seems normal to the people around me, than what seems like the norm. The intensity of my emotions is often much stronger than it seems like it is for other people. Sometimes it feels like my emotions are out of control, despite the fact that I know logically I'm having a reaction that is not in line with the severity of the situation. I know that. And yet, I don't know how to turn off that fire hose of emotion that sometimes comes over me. And sometimes I just have to sequester myself off and wait until it calms down, because otherwise I will say and do things that are destructive. I'll hurt people around me that I love, emotionally. I will act out in different kinds of ways. I'm also particularly good at constructing bad outcomes and hyper-focusing on them. So an example would be, this has happened to me more than once. I've gotten an email from the person who was my manager, my boss, and said, hey, could you, it's like a Friday, late on Friday. Hey, on Monday, could you come in and we could talk? Okay, all right. Well, what's going to happen? Oh, this is alarming. I don't know what's going on. Maybe he knew about that thing that I did. But is that thing, oh my gosh, oh no. And I will construct a scenario where I'm losing my job. We won't have any income. I will be so shamed that my family will abandon me. We will lose our house. I will be homeless. My career is shot. I will have nothing to live for. And I will live the next couple of days unable to put that aside, unable to take that out of my brain and say, you know what, that's ridiculous. It's probably not something like that. Everything's going to be okay. I want to tell myself that, but it doesn't work that way. I can't make those emotions are so strong, and I'm so good at constructing those outcomes. And I have very detailed lists of that, and I live as if that is then the predetermined outcome. And I get in on Monday, and my boss says, how's that project going? I'm like, oh, it's good. Actually, we finished that up, and that was really good. And meanwhile, there's sweat pouring off, and I'm like, and it's like an elephant has been sitting on my chest for the past 3 days, and suddenly it just got off. And there really wasn't anything to worry about. But I'm really, really good at constructing those things. Really, really good at that. So how do I deal with it? I take medication is one thing that I do. I take about 5 different things every day. And that's something that helps me. And I've been dealing with this 30 years. And right now, that's the kind of cocktail that works for me that helps kind of keep my stuff in check. It's not perfect. It doesn't mean that I never have symptoms, but they're a lot less severe. And I also see a therapist every 2 weeks. I talk about what's happened with me, why I do the things that I do, try to break down those scenarios, try to break down sort of the process of that behavior. We go through a thing called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a common thing that's used with a lot of people with anxiety disorders. That's pretty effective. And talk about how and why I do the things I do and come up with strategies to address that. Basically, kind of having a coach for your brain instead of somebody who's telling you to do sit-ups. Right? That's how it is with my therapist. Your therapist can be different. But that's how it kind of works with me. And those things help. And I've gotten better at things. Stuff used to be a lot worse. It's gotten better. It impacts, though, my work every day. Every single day, I am living with my brain, and the work that I do involves thinking and solving problems and figuring stuff out. And things that affect the way that my brain processes work are pretty serious. That affects my thinking are particularly problematic, potentially at least. Now, sometimes it gives me superpowers, absolutely gives me superpowers. I'm really good at certain aspects of my job because of the way my brain works. You know how I'm really good at constructing negative outcomes? Really good at that. I'm actually really good at constructing outcomes, period, and figuring out, well, if we do this, how's that going to impact our system over here? If we do this thing in the back end, how's that going to impact how a user has to interact with our system over here? I tend to be kind of good at anticipating security issues for that reason. Like, how could somebody attack our system in such a way that does this? I'm not an expert. I'm not some super InfoSec dude. But I tend to be better at that than some people. I also, probably because of some of the stuff that I've dealt with in my life, and I think a lot about how things affect people, I tend to empathize strongly with the users, and I think a lot about, if we store data like this, how does that impact the way that the user is, what they're able to do? And ultimately, as a developer, that's sort of my job, is to make tools, not sort of, it is my job, is to make tools that people use. So it's rather helpful to be able to empathize strongly with users or people, and it's often tough because the people who are building this stuff often have a lot of difficulty understanding what it's like to be a user of the thing they make. I'm a little bit better at it than some people. I'm not perfect, but I'm a little bit better than your average developer. Sometimes it absolutely gives me superpowers. And sometimes it absolutely ruins me. Sometimes when something happens and those emotions kick in and I can't control them, it craters my day completely. It renders me unproductive. I cannot do my work effectively. I may not be able to do my work, period. I just can't. I cannot, because I cannot focus, I cannot concentrate, I cannot do it. The toughest thing with all of this in my life, in dealing with this stuff, where I've been dealing with stuff, particularly ADHD. I've had that since I was in school. I know the whole thing. I can think of things that I did in second or third grade. I was like, oh, that was what was going on. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 27. But I've been dealing with that the whole time. Anxiety and depression started becoming much worse when I was 12 or 13. But in dealing with all of this, the toughest part of it for me was that feeling alone, feeling like you were not like anyone else around you, feeling as if everybody else seems to be capable of getting through life and seems to be able to is okay with this stuff, and they seem to get, like in high school, they seem to get their homework done. They can read 100 pages of Dostoevsky in a night and be able to write something about it, and I can't. What's the problem? Why can't I do this? And you feel, and I felt for a long time that I was incapable of living this life. I always screw up and I always fail, and people that I love will always grow tired of me and leave, and I will always do that because I'm not capable of sustaining doing things the right way. I always blow up and something goes wrong, and that is how I felt for a very, very long time. But there's a lot of people who feel like that. A lot of people feel like that. And that is what I'm here to talk about, and that is what we formed OSMI to fight. To talk a little bit about how this affects us. If we just look at the general population, 1 in 5 adults have a mental disorder in any 1 year in the US. That is 20% of the population. That is looking at the general population. We'll get to other stuff in a minute. But at the very basic, if we look at general population, is it particularly abnormal to have a mental disorder? No, it's actually not. In fact, it's extremely common. Anxiety disorders are the most common. They affect about 18% of the population. The numbers add up to more than 20 because you typically have, again, comorbidity. You have issues where people will be diagnosed with multiple things at the same time. There's a World Health Organization study that was done in 2004, was released, I think, in 2008. And it's the most recent study of what they call the global burden of disease. This idea of disease burden is a metric they came up with which combines premature death and years lived with disability. The idea is that they're trying to measure the impact that a disease has on a population. And in this study, they found that the burden of mental disorders was the largest of all disorder categories in North America, larger than cardiovascular disease and larger than cancer. And this is a quote from this study. In all regions, neuropsychiatric conditions are the most important causes of disability, accounting for around 1/3 of years lost to disability among adults aged 15 years and over. The most important cause of disability, World Health Organization said. That is across the globe. If we look at economic costs, and these things are always kind of a little fuzzy, but it gives you some ideas. Mental health conditions are the second leading cause of workplace absenteeism. I don't know what the first is, but second, mental health conditions. If we're just looking at depression, workers with depression lose about 5.6 hours a week. Workers without lose about 1.5. That is a significant difference in terms of hours lost. And if we look at sort of these numbers, you try to attach dollar figures to this, again, it's always a little bit fuzzy. But again, just looking at depression, just one major category of mental health disorder, $43.7 billion in absenteeism from work, 200 million days lost. Lost productivity, direct treatment, that's an enormous impact. And I think particularly if you think about people either not working effectively or not being able to be in the office at all. Because at the end of the day, sick workers don't work. It doesn't matter what they're sick with. People who are not healthy are not as productive. It doesn't matter if they have a cold. It doesn't matter if they got joint pain and they can't get up, they got a back problem. It doesn't matter if they've got depression or they've got anxiety. It keeps them from being as productive. Now, we have, for a couple years, done what we call the Mental Health and Tech Survey. And this is an opt-in survey, so it's self-selective. So keep that in mind if we go up and look at some of the deeper results. But these are results from our 2016 initiative, which has, so far, it's still open. If you want to take it, that would be great. But this is data that we had from 2016 as of November 16th. This is what I collected. And this just includes people in the US, and it just includes non-self-employed folks. The reason I did that was because there's some differences about the US compared with other countries. Typically in the US, your workplace is your primary conduit for healthcare. And people who are self-employed have a different situation. They are their own boss. They can say, I'm going to take a day off. I'm going to go get treatment for this. Da, da, da. They have different opportunities. People who are employed by an organization have to work with that organization and what they offer. So there's 4 questions that I want to show you. There is tons of data in here from people all over the world. And we had about 1,500 responses. This is just the folks in the US. First question, do you think that discussing a health issue with your employer would have negative consequences? We asked about physical health. 72% of people said no, about 3/4. Maybe said 25%. Yes said 4%. 4% said yes, excuse me. Most people feel that if they discuss a physical health issue, probably would not be negative consequences in the tech workplace. For mental health, only about 1/3 said no. About 2/3 said yes or maybe. That's a very significant difference. And I think underlines the attitudes and perception of mental health and the consequences for speaking about it openly in the workplace. Would you bring up a health issue with a potential employer in an interview? And again, we split this between physical and mental. With physical, no and maybe, 76%. It's not surprising. Most people don't want to give people a reason not to hire them. There are a number of issues that could go into that. Some would be like, well, what does it matter if my knee acts up every once in a while? Some people will tell you there is no way in heck you should ever tell somebody that you are planning on getting pregnant because you will not get the job. That is a physical health issue. So again, there's lots of reasons. But yes, 24%, not that high. Let's compare that with mental health. Only 7% of people said yes. Twice as many said no. Maybe was a little bit lower, probably being eaten up by that no. This, in fact, is higher than the numbers, or excuse me, this is, in fact, a little bit better than the numbers we had in 2014 when we last did this survey. But it is still the case that far fewer people would bring up a mental health issue versus a physical health issue in an interview because they believe, I believe what you can get from that, is they believe it is more likely that a mental health issue will be something that eliminates them from contention for that job. Now, this is despite the fact that the Americans with Disability Act says it is illegal to do so if you have more than 15 employees. But it's also almost impossible to prove it. Does your employer provide resources to learn more about mental health issues and how to seek help? Again, the workplace being the primary conduit for healthcare, how does the workplace educate? How does the workplace point out these resources and their availability and things like that? Only 30% said yes. So 70% say no, employer does not provide resources. And another third says, I don't know, which I think is just as bad as no. Two-thirds of folks who are working as tech professionals, their employer isn't providing them with resources about mental health. Keep in mind what the World Health Organization said about the importance of this and the burden that it has on our society. And the fourth and last question that I'll show you here, do you feel that being identified as a person with a mental health issue would hurt your career? And those numbers, only 12% said no, I don't think it would, or no, it has not. Everyone else says maybe, or yes, I think it would, or yes, it has. The perception is such that people believe, 87% of the folks who answer these questions, believe that being identified as somebody with a mental health issue is going to hurt their career. Why would they be willing to discuss it? Why would they be willing to seek help? Why would they be willing to get better as that workplace is the conduit for healthcare if they think there's going to be negative consequences for being known as that? I think that's a great question. I think a lot of people are very afraid to discuss it. And it's tough because change is really hard, because we are scared. Because frequently, the things I've encountered is that people just don't know what to do. Employers or people who are working in the workplace who have some responsibility for this stuff, they're often afraid of endangering their workplace, saying the wrong thing, giving the wrong advice, and endangering their workplace as a result. Endangering the health of the organization, the existence of the organization. And people who are employed are also afraid of losing their jobs, as is demonstrated in the information we have. People are afraid to lose their jobs because they're afraid that they'll be identified as that. Now, at OSMI, there are things we can do to help. There's a lot of things we can do to help. But there's 5 things that I think you can think about right now that I think will be effective and I think will help. The first thing is, and this is kind of a meta thing and it's kind of hard, what does this mean? Make a commitment to change. But I think fundamentally you have to make a decision that you're going to think and speak about mental health differently than you do right now. And that's a matter of changing yourself. And it doesn't mean that you have to go around and say, hey, I've got this thing, you know what, my brother, he did this, my sister. You do not have to be like me. My therapist says I have a confessional personality, and that is very accurate. I am a bit of an oversharer, let's say. And that works out for stuff like this. I'm good at this because I can do that. It doesn't mean you have to be like this. But being able to speak openly about mental health issues and speak to it without shame and emphasize that there's no shame in it, that can change that world around you, the social group that interacts with you. The social group you interact with the most is probably your workplace, for better or for worse. Those are probably the people you spend the most time with. And you can have a significant impact on those people if you indicate to them that they can be less afraid of this stuff, it is almost certain, based on the numbers, that there are people in your social group who are dealing with mental health issues and are afraid to talk about it right now, and you don't know who they are. If you're able to speak more openly about it, you will help those people feel safer, feel less stressed, be mentally healthier, and be more likely to seek treatment. The second thing you can do is we've created handbooks specifically to help people with these kinds of issues. We have 3. They are available for free as ebooks. There are handbooks for employers and employees on how to navigate ADA law, specifically dedicated to tech workplaces and mental health. So there's one for employers, there's one for employees dealing with ADA law. The third one, is how to create supportive workplaces and promote mental wellness within the workplace. All 3 of these, they were developed by Jennifer Kulian, PhD, who has a PhD in psychology. She works at Keen.io with a little bit of help from me and some help from Johanna Wu, who is a PhD in organizational psychology. These handbooks are available for free. They're Creative Commons licensed, and you can get them right now at our website. The third thing you can do is take a course called Mental Health First Aid. It's an 8-hour course. You can find lots and lots of people who will teach it in this area or in almost any other part of the country. It's available in 22 different countries. In the US, I paid $50 to take it, and I got lunch with it. It was a nice little box lunch. It was really, it was pleasant. And that was really cool. And I learned a ton about how to identify if someone is in a mental health crisis, and then how to interact with them most effectively so that they are more likely to seek help. The key here is, you might have noticed I did not say how to fix their problem for them. That is not your job. You are not trained for that. I am not trained for that. Do not try to fix their problem. People in tech, particularly developers, want to solve problems for people. Do not do this. This is not your job. You don't have to fix everything. You listen empathetically and talk to them in a way that's going to encourage them to seek help. I think it's a very important course to take. I particularly think if you have anything to do with managing people, this is an essential course to take because you will learn a lot about how to interact with people in a rewarding and positive way that helps them succeed. Tell people about the work that you're doing, the efforts that you're doing. You take this class, you read these handbooks, talk about it openly. Share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it on Google+. Take a selfie when you're on a break at the training course and say, hey, I'm doing this thing, it's really super cool. Talk about it. The more you talk about it, the people around you will be less afraid. I guarantee it. And the fifth thing, and I think the most important thing, this is about peer support. And there's certain organizations like NAMI and NAMI, I can't remember exactly what it stands for, National Association of Mentally Ill, but I probably got it wrong. Really focus on peer support. Tell people that they matter in your life, how they impact your life positively and how strong and great they are. Everybody needs to hear this. There are few of us who would not benefit from hearing this from the external sources. There are few of us who have a voice so strong within themselves that they don't need it from anyone else. Everybody needs to hear this, particularly people whose brains lie to them. And my brain has been lying to me for most of my life, telling me that I didn't matter, that all I did was screw things up, and that I was a burden to people. So what's the upside for this? And I don't talk about just the upside for people. You feel better, you feel that you've done some moral good. Why try to change the workplace? What's the upside for the workplace? And why? Because it benefits the organization, everyone in it. Because mental wellness means better employees, period. Employees feel valued and secure and work more effectively when employers demonstrate a commitment to their well-being. And people are going to want to work for you. People want to work someplace that respects them fully and that doesn't ignore their well-being. If I go back and I think about the jobs that I liked in my career and the jobs that I haven't liked, the ones that I liked, it did not have a lot to do with the work I was doing. It had to do with the people. Did I have good relationships with those people, respectful relationships? Did we have a mutual respect and concern for each other? The people I always worked hardest for were people that I felt like had concern about me as a person. They were concerned about my well-being. They wanted me to be happy and healthy. That's what makes for a good workplace. Not ping pong tables and not free lunches. That's what makes for a good workplace. In 2016, Open Sourcing Mental Illness was not a nonprofit. It was just a dude, me, who had some ideas. That's all it was. Started to make some changes, though, to do some stuff that was maybe a little more ambitious. I had been speaking about mental health for about 3 years at different tech conferences. It was mostly just me. We had started a little bit of work on those handbooks I talked about. That was about it. But in 2016, we had some goals, and we had to get some money for those goals. Those goals primarily were to become a legal nonprofit 501c3, to create ebooks and printed handbooks. The handbooks we put together were not ebooks at the time. You couldn't put them on your Kindle and fly around with them, stuff like that. To release an API and release our survey data from 2016, to do another survey too. To do a video presentation series, to do a video workshop, and to get more people talking and speaking about this stuff. So I wanted to raise some money. I did this on Indiegogo. Again, this is really, people are just giving me money. There was no organization behind it. It was not tax deductible. And so I'd done a couple other ones before, and they'd been fairly successful. And the goal 2015 had been $5,000. This year we said, oh, hey, let's do $10,000. This is going to be a huge amount of money. I'm kind of freaked out about it. But I'm going to ask for it because I want to do some ambitious stuff. I'm not going to sit and be afraid of doing ambitious things. I'm really going to try to do them. So we did this on Indiegogo. You get a reward, you give us a bunch of money, you get a t-shirt, stuff like that. And our time to goal was 72 hours. So we raised that $10,000 in 72 hours. And the total that we raised in 30 days was $22,481. That was really, really, really awesome. Amazing, humbling. And I think speaks to how many people think that this is really important. That we're not doing a good enough job. That we can do a lot better. And I think we can. This is a list that there's probably a couple people missing from here, but this is from 2015 and 2016, probably again about as of November. This is 275 badasses who all gave money. They gave $10 or they gave $1,000. It varies, whatever. But these are all really amazing people who stepped up. And it is incredibly humbling to put something out there and to realize that people are willing to just give you their money to do that. That is crazy. I'm not, I didn't come out here with I didn't write some paper. I'm not a PhD in this. I just think it's important. And I tried to say something about it because I felt like I needed to. And it's very humbling to get that kind of support from this community. And as of recently, we now have, well, actually, there's a couple of people missing here. We got about 15 people now are involved in this. It used to just be me. Now we got about 15 people. I was afraid to try ambitious things. All these people stepped up and they said, you know what you're doing? It's really awesome. I want to help too. And they're doing amazing stuff. These people are much more smarter and more capable than I am and are just doing amazing things. And you can see up there it says board members. That's because we became a nonprofit 501c3 organization as of September of this year. And that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing. It turned from just somebody doing some stuff, which was me. Now it is a real legal entity, and we're doing this work. And all these donations are tax deductible and stuff like that. It's really cool. We also have this, it's an in-progress thing, but this is our Mental Health and Tech 2016, a survey graph and API. This is an open project you can help with. You can also examine the data at something like Kaggle.com. We have some stuff there. But you can do data analysis with it. It is all stored in a graph database, Neo4j graph database, and you can check that stuff out. And we're working on a hypermedia API for it. These are things that you can contribute to if you're interested in. If you're a data wonk, check this stuff out. You can check it out on Kaggle, or you can pull the stuff directly out of Neo4j. If you want to help with writing code for this API, all cool stuff. And also need help for how do we visualize this data. It's also something we did called the OSMI forums, which were formerly by a guy named Greg Bogus, who was here in Chicago. He moved to New York last year, and he worked still at Twilio. And he spoke a lot about this kind of stuff in the Ruby community, and he had a site called devpress.com, and it was down for a couple months because, like a lot of things, he was busy and something broke and didn't have time to fix it. We took that over, we talked to him, made this exchange, and now it's the OSMI forums, but otherwise it's the same. It is a place for people who work in tech, who are tech professionals, to talk about their problems openly. They can post anonymously, they make up an account name, it doesn't matter, we don't check or validate that stuff. They can post anonymously about their problems and talk with other people in tech about what's going on with them, their specific issues. And that's the forum we took over this year. And I should say, I don't even have a slide for it. We are working on this video workshop, and we're going to get a rough edit soon, and that's aimed at HR folks and executive teams. That features Dr. Akulian and Dr. Wu, and then me for like 5 seconds, talking about why this stuff matters and why it needs to matter in your workplace. So we accomplished most of our goals, or at least getting part way there. Some was taking a little while longer than it has been, but we're doing okay. Now, one question sometimes I get asked is, well, why did you call it open source? Open sourcing mental illness, and they make some kind of joke about, where's the code? And, and it makes this, I don't know, hot button thing. But in all of my career, last 20 years of my career, it's all been based on open source stuff. Not all the things that I've created have been open source, but everything that I have done has been based on open source technology, every bit of it. But I'm going to assert that open source culture and open source community is not about code. That is a MacGuffin. It's not about the code. It's about learning and sharing together. And it's about growing together. And it's about open arms, and it's about open minds, and an open hand to pull the next person up and help them help themselves. It's about a peer group that's supportive and welcoming and embraces each other to help each other. I started this first time I talked about this was at an unconference session at PHP Tech, which was out in Roseland in May 16th, 2013, and I've done about 50 conferences since then. I did this little unconf talk. And every bit of the success that we've had, turning this into a legal entity, fundraising, the people coming together, all of the stuff that we have done, and all the success that I've had over the first 3 years, or the last 3 or 4 years, talking about this stuff is based on open source culture, and it doesn't really have anything to do with code. This is what open source means to me, and that's why I call this open sourcing mental illness. But that's all good, that's all fine. But I want to get back to what I kind of think is the heart of the matter, wrap this up. At the end of the day, this is what's going on, I believe. It's that our colleagues and our friends and our people, the people that we work with, our colleagues, our community members, the folks that we work with in doing this kind of stuff, this sort of tech-oriented stuff, these tech professionals, our people, our friends and our colleagues and our people, a lot of them suffer in silence because they're afraid to talk about it. And sometimes some of them just disappear on us. They go away because for one reason or another, and we're left to wonder why and regret and try to understand what happened with them. And there's some that we can save and there's some that we can't. But the only thing that allows these people to suffer in silence, and the only reason we don't save more of our kin and our kith, is because of fear. The only reason is fear. The only reason that these people suffer, that we suffer, and that we lose many of our friends, is because of fear. We have to choose. You and I and all of us have to choose to be stronger than that fear. We have to choose to be stronger. So thanks for listening. I hope you'll consider helping us out with what we do, sharing our message and resources, taking steps to support your peers, volunteering with us if you're interested. You can contact us on our website. If you feel like donating time or money, that is very helpful for us to do. It is tax deductible. So, thank you very much. I appreciate you giving me the time to speak on this. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah.
And for now, we do have some mics up if anyone wants to ask Ed any questions. And we also have a Dory at GoEd-Dory if you want to ask your questions there. So feel free to step up to the mic if you have a question for Ed. Otherwise, we can go straight to the Dory. So we'll go to the Dory. So the question here, Ed, is, I've been suffering from an episode of major depression for 2 years. Do you have advice for how to combat negative thoughts at work? It's often hard for me to see the positive side of project proposals and designs, even when it feels like others can.
I smirk because that sounds familiar to me. Advice is tough because something that I've learned sometimes the hard way is that you shouldn't give advice about things that you don't actually have any enough expertise to speak on. And one of the things that also I think you find is that, particularly when dealing with mental health issues, things that work for one person often do not have anything, don't matter at all. One time I feel better when I drink a lot of water. I do. Doesn't mean you're going to feel better because you drink a lot of water. Maybe it's a good idea. Hey, hydrate, that's awesome. That doesn't mean that's going to fix your problems. So advice is tough because there's not a, oh, well, that's the way you solve that kind of problem situation for everybody. I think the thing that I would suggest is that the person who's dealing with this, first off, that sounds really tough. And that must be very hard, particularly to feel like everybody else seems like they're dealing with it okay, and I'm not. I know that's not fun. I'm not going to say I understand every single thing everybody goes through. I don't. But that's something I know a little bit about. So I can't give you a specific advice. But what I can say is that taking that step to speak to somebody about it, whether it's and particularly somebody who's a mental health professional, I think is really important. That can be really scary, though, too. Oftentimes, you're overcoming a huge amount of inertia to not do anything. I've run into people who've had maybe occasionally bad experiences with one therapist, and they're like, I don't ever want to see somebody again. It's terrible. Or they just there's a lot of stuff hung up in that, and it can be many reasons. The first thing that I hope is that they have a peer around them who they can speak with openly about. And I hope everybody thinks about that as maybe you're that peer. It might be, it's one of your co-employees. It could be anybody who's saying this, and this is not an uncommon thing. People in this situation are afraid, typically, very afraid. And even if you don't deal with this stuff yourself, you can have an immense positive impact on someone's life by simply helping them not feel like they have to be afraid. And it doesn't mean fixing their problem for them. But what it means is that you're not going to judge them. You're not going to view it as a character flaw. You're going to listen empathetically and be encouraging towards them. Say, hey, it's okay. We're going to figure this out. The thing that I would probably do in this case, from a practical standpoint, it sounds like there's good resources here at Google in your EAP and other things. I would look at what those resources are. I would identify somebody who specifically deals with depression, and I go try to speak with a professional about that. That can be scary. But it is harder and it's probably not going to get better until you start seeking treatment. And I guess I'd ask everybody around here, if we're speaking openly and honestly and positively about mental health, that is something that's going to help people like this be more willing to get the help that they need and not have to suffer. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say people suffer in silence. And so practically speaking, you want to get help. If you need somebody, find someone, hopefully, that you can trust, who maybe you can talk about this a little bit with. If you need some help getting getting to that point where you can seek out help. And maybe they can help you with that. Be a person, folks here, be a person who somebody could turn to and say, I'm scared to do this. Can you help me? Could you maybe help me set up the appointment? Could you maybe go with me and just sit outside? I constantly run into folks who are afraid to go seek help. And just being that person for them and saying, yeah, I'm going to help you. If you need, I will call if you set that appointment up. But I'm here for you, whatever you need. Being that person is what this person needs the most. And it's going to be a lot easier for them, I think, if we can all do that. So that's what I'd say. Look at what you've got in your EAP. The woman who spoke earlier, I bet, would have some specific stuff you could help with. Just go and talk and say, you don't have to spill your whole guts. Just say, hey, I've been having some problems. I think it's related to depression. I would like to speak privately with somebody. That's all you got to do. And that's the first step to getting better. And there is treatment. There are things available for you. This can and will get better. Just got to go seek the help and find the people who can help you with it. So, yeah, that's what I'd say.
And being mindful of the time, if you do have questions for Ed, you can always approach him after the talk, as he mentioned a little bit earlier. I do have one question of my own as well. Just in your experience, speaking on the lecture circuit and also just working with companies, are there any success stories or any use cases that you've seen, examples from folks that you've spoken with at companies?
Yeah. The first thing I'd say is that I can speak to this directly in that when I go up and speak about this stuff, every time I speak, I have people come up to me and say how important it was for them to just hear somebody speak openly without fear about mental health. That just that act can be transformative for them. And that is humbling because that is weird. I'm just up here babbling about stuff. I'm oversharing and acting like I'm an expert. I don't know if I am. I don't know. But just that, I guess if you're talking about success stories, I see that as a big success story because every time I talk about it, people tell me that. We have some examples in our handbook specifically that talks about some choices that certain companies have made. I think that the employee programs that they have at Keen.io that were developed by Dr. Jennifer Kulian, who is one of our board members, really, really significant and cool stuff that they're doing. Essentially a coaching program for everybody. Really cool stuff. And so it's not just mental health stuff, but it's also God, I hate this term, life coaching. But let's imagine that it's not as weird as it is. So stuff like that I think is really helpful. There's a company called Olark that has, one of the key things that they do, and also Keen does, is that in the absence of, let's step back for a second. In the absence of actively telling people it's okay to talk about this stuff and to seek help, the default in our culture is going to be a negative. The default is going to be people falling back and assuming that they can't talk about it safely. So companies must actively inform about the resources they have and about the values that they have that this is okay to discuss. So that means you can't just put it in a handbook that somebody gets when they start their employment and then people throw it in their desk and they're never going to look at it again. You have to actively remind people again and again via multiple ways of communicating that this is something that's okay, that our values at this organization are such. You must do that. And the companies I think have been most effective at dealing with that have been companies that make that part of their values and their DNA, their culture, all the time, that this is just as important as every other health aspect, and we are going to talk openly about it, and we're going to actively remind you that these are the resources available, and that yes, you can take a day off. Reminder, you can take a day off if you are feeling down or stressed out or really anxious or things like that. You can do that, and that's okay, and that's just as valid as if you're sick or you hurt your back or anything like that. It means you're not well, and you can do that, and that is perfectly valid. But people need to be actively reminded of that. I think that that's a key thing.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Ed.
Thank you for having
Very
me. I really
engaging
appreciate
talk.
it.
We appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you next time Talks at Google.
Thank you.